My game is called Closed Circuit. It's a strategy game that involves planning and having observation skills, where players use a variety of information gathering equipment to learn about enemy units and what they have to do to complete an objective. The core aspect of the gameplay revolves around using a CCTV system, and CC stands for closed circuit, so that's where the name comes from. And you use that in a building, preset cameras in conjunction with other tools that the player chooses the location of, like sound sensors or something that gives off an audio cue when something walks next to it. You use those to learn about the enemy units in order to choose how you respond. You respond by having indirect control over NPC characters, like friendly characters that you control, similar to other strategy games where you maneuver different units around. It's going to be the same concept where there's going to be multiple friendly characters, each doing different things. The genre is a strategy game. It's going to require a lot of planning ahead in order to succeed. And the audience is probably going to be, like 16 or older, just because the game's probably not going to be easy. It's not the intent. But there really isn't any sort of explicit content in the game other than like moderate violence, but that's pretty normal. And the only platform I could see this working on is on PC, just because of how the controls would have to work. It would be difficult to bind it to a controller, but I mean, you never know. Also, Steam provides a good market for niche games like this, just kind of games that don't fit into a lot of different categories, where console doesn't really provide that market. The core aspect of the gameplay relies on the usage of cameras and other information gathering tools in order to learn more about what's going on and how to complete the objectives. The tools provided, the enemy types are all randomized, as well as the map every time you play, so that way it stays interesting when you replay it. And there are different objectives that the game chooses from. One of them is a defend the area, where you have a specific room in a building and you just have to defend it. Maneuver your units around to, as best as you can based off the information you gather. Identify the target, where there's a lot of people in the building and you have to use certain hints and clues to find them, as well as other observation tools where certain enemies may not trigger certain things, like maybe they don't show up on a camera but they do on an audio sensor, or they have a specific sound cue that they give off, things like that. Then there's clear the building, where you just have to get rid of all hostiles. The core mechanics of the game, there's two phases: a prep phase and an action phase. During the prep phase, you prepare, obviously, where you choose the locations for your equipment that you're given. Different difficulty settings will probably change the equipment that you have to make it a little more difficult. Where easier ones, you have more tools at your disposal. It's important to plan the placement, where replaying the game becomes handy when you have better map knowledge and a better understanding of different choke points and stuff. And so you have to plan carefully where you place everything, because you won't be able to replace it, and sometimes you won't be able to see on like an overhead map that we'll get into later where your stuff is. So if you hear like an audio cue go off from a sensor, then you have to remember where you put it, right? Stuff like that. During the action phase, in the next phase, you have to rely on the information that you get from your tools that you place down in order to guide your essentially puppet characters, your NPCs that you control, your friendly units. So that way you respond to what you learn as you play. There isn't much of a story or a narrative that drives this game. It's just kind of a fun to play. There's not much to learn story-wise. It's all pretty normal. The main character isn't voiced, main character in quotation marks. It's basically just a catalyst for you playing the game. It's not a real character that's fleshed out in any way. There'll probably be like chatter in the building from NPCs, but it's not going to be anything important to hear. The real audio that you're listening for is sound cues and stuff, or footsteps, things like that. The justification for the creation of the game is that there really aren't any games like this that I know of. There's games that I drew inspiration from, like the cameras in Rainbow Six. I really like the controls on that and how you get to place different gadgets that gain information and then you respond. But then that game is primarily a shooter game, and I kind of wanted to get rid of the shooter aspect and just focus on the strategy of placing down gadgets to learn more. And then, as I said, Steam provides a place for niche games to thrive. A camera-based strategy game is kind of out there, so I've never seen anything like it. Then obviously, there's games like Rainbow that have elements of it, or Ready or Not has an interesting one. That's a SWAT game where you can see your allies' head cameras, which I thought was another cool feature that could be in my game, where you can get almost like a first-person perspective of your non-player units that you control indirectly. And then it's also Phasmophobia has an entire trailer for as a home base with a lot of different screens, with 5 different screens that all display different information that's important for figuring out. You're trying to learn what a ghost is, so there's a lot of strategy there, but then you also physically go in to the building. So I just think that it'd be unique to have a strategy game like this. This is my game flyer. I did the best I could. The intent was to kind of emulate what part of what the inside of where your player is. I just put the name on that middle computer screen. The background, you got a little blueprint. That's kind of what I imagine. You're looking at that, and you can see different colored dots of things that you've learned, like where your equipment is that you've placed down, or where your friendly units are, and you use this overhead view to really figure out a strategy. And then I got a little sound sensor. I just pulled that off Phasmophobia and stuck it on a computer screen. Where you can see different sensors and things will spike, something like that. I think would be actually kind of cool to mess around with. And then you got your main computer screen that would show your cameras, what you'd see. And that's my game.